Hello, everybody. All right, so today's lesson is on freedom of expression. And over the next couple days, you're going to be reading lesson 17. It was attached, We the People, Freedom of Expression. But we're going to just talk about it a little bit today. And you can see on the board here, I've put the 4 things that are included in freedom of expression. We hear a lot of people talk about freedom of speech, right? But freedom of expression is not just that. So I'm going to start where we should always start, which is the primary document, which is the amendments. This is the first amendment to the Constitution, and I dare say, probably the most important. So it says, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. So we're going to break those down a little bit, but first let's think about why the founders would have such a strong opinion about this. We know they lived under the British rule for a long time, and we know that many of them were, persecuted for their religion. So that kind of explains the religion part, the freedom of religion. But freedom of speech, press, assembly, petition, I think we saw a good bit of this in the keeping room. Remember, they had to sort of sneak around and they weren't allowed to really speak negatively or obviously because they didn't want them to know their plans. They were sneaking around a little bit. And the founders did not want to live in a country where you'd have to do that, right? They wanted you to be able to speak and say what you thought without being persecuted and, arrested. So I want us to think about other countries. We are so used to having this that it's hard to even imagine that in 2020, there are countries that do not have freedom of expression, but there are many, many countries that don't. And I'm just going to talk about a few. Some of the big ones that we hear a lot about: North Korea, Cuba, Syria, Burma, Libya. These are all countries where people are censored, meaning the government wants to know what you're going to say before you say it. And if they don't like it, then you're not going to say it. That does not happen here, right? Our government is always criticized, like daily. No matter who the president is, no matter who's in Congress, no matter who is the Speaker of the House or the Vice President, it doesn't matter. Someone out there is going to criticize. And you know what? They're allowed to, right? As long as it's true, they're allowed to. In these countries, it's very different. In the countries that I mentioned and many more, there's one leader, it's usually a dictator, and sometimes they even fix the election to make sure they're reelected. In one country we're going to talk about, there was the leader was made president for life in, I think, 1999. And so he's not going anywhere, no matter what he does, right? So there's usually just the one leader. They don't have a balance of powers like we've been talking about, where Congress and the executive branch and the judicial branch all have powers that regulate the other. It's the one guy, and he has all the power in these countries. Usually, the government has total control of the media, and I mean newspapers that are printed, television news, radio news. Some of them even have where you have to go through the frequency of the government radio station and the government television station. So they're controlling everything that comes out. And trust me, they are not going to let you say something negative against the president or the government. So they're censored, right? They know whatever they say, that it's going to be heard by the government first, and then they'll decide if it can go out to the rest of the people. So why even try, right? Um, and let's see, all the news is usually positive. If there's anything that is negative, that's like I was reading about one country where they had this huge famine that was destroying the people in one particular area of the country, and it never came on the news because they want everyone to think the government is in control and everything is wonderful and nothing going on is bad. So they're censoring, they're making sure everything is positive, and that one guy is leading, and it usually is a guy leading that government in that country. All right, so the country I was talking about that had the leader that is the president for life since 1999, it's not a country that you've probably heard of. It's called Turkmenistan, and it is a communist country. And the interesting thing, so the president is Vyazov. That's his name. That's his last name. So President Vyazov, total control, right? The TV stations, as they're giving their news reports, there is a picture, a profile of him in the corner the whole time. Like, it's almost like worshiping, right? Like we're worshiping him. And this blows my mind. At the beginning of every newscast, they make this oath, a pledge, that their tongues will shrivel if their reports ever slander the country, the flag, or the president. Like, that's a serious pledge, right? But for us to think about that, it's kind of unbelievable because we have lived in this country where we have these freedoms and we don't have to worry about being censored if we're saying something that's negative, which is nice. But we have to understand why it's so important, because there are people living in this world today who are censored on a daily basis. So let's see why that they thought that this was important. The four things: speech, press, assembly, petition. So speech, you have the right to speak ideas, things that you think are true, opinions that you have about different things. You're able to speak it. Press. The press, now focus. There's an important detail on this one. They can print whatever they like as long as it's true. Okay? If it's not true and they print it, they'll get sued. They'll have to pay a lot of money. The press is supposed to report the truth. But if it's the truth, and even if it's something horrible about a president or about a congressman or about a vice president, they can print it. Even if it makes them look bad, even if it makes that person look bad, as long as it's true, they have the right to print it. Now, there's a word that I love. I see it all the time in the newspaper. Alleged or allegedly. That's kind of their get out of jail free card, because if you say, this person allegedly stole $200,000 from this place he used to work. Allegedly means he's been accused, but it hasn't been proven. So I'm not saying it's true, right? But if they put that word in, they sort of have a little bit more leeway as far as what they can say. But the freedom of the press is so important because it allows the people to get the truth, even if it's something that makes a government official look bad. All right, freedom of assembly. Oh boy, I know what y'all are going to say. See, I already know. You have the right to meet with others to discuss your beliefs, ideas, or feelings. And I know you're going to say that we're not allowed to really do that right now. And we're going to get into some other things in a little bit. But basically what this means is, people like to protest. If you do it peaceably, if you show up at the state capitol and you have your little signs and you're walking around peacefully, you're allowed to do that. And your sign could say something like, we hate the governor. He's the worst person in the world. It's okay. You are allowed to assemble and to show your dislike of things that are going on. With your little signs, you can show your ideas, your beliefs. It has to be peaceful though, right? You can't come in and be screaming in people's faces and attack the policemen who are there to keep control. You can't block, I mean, there are rules. You can't block doorways or, sidewalks that go up to the front. Like, there are some rules, but you can, if you follow the rules, assemble and give those opinions in that way, and you cannot be arrested for that. And that's a really important right for our people to have. And then the freedom of petition is just to ask the government to rethink something that they've done. People often actually make a petition and have people sign it. And once you have so many signatures, you can, submit it to the government and they'll take a look at it, right? We have the right to do that. And basically what you're saying there is, this isn't just my opinion. Like, a lot of people agree with me. And that's why you have people sign the petition. So you can ask the government to correct things. That's the freedom of petition. So all of those together is the freedom of expression. And it's all in the First Amendment along with freedom of religion. All right. So special circumstances. Right now, we are in a special circumstance, right? The governments decided at some point that the health of the people was going to make it so that we should not assemble in large groups, okay? Here's where it has to, in order for it to be legal, here's what they have to do, and I think they did. They can't point out a certain group. They can't say, you can assemble everywhere except church, because then you're singling out the church and it's a religious freedom thing. You can't say, you can assemble at the churches, you can assemble at the beach, you can assemble at the park, but you cannot assemble for like a rally, because then you're singling out the people that are trying to give their opinions. If you say, we don't think you should assemble in groups because of the health of our people, period, then it's okay in a special circumstance. So what's been happening here lately is exactly that. Like, the government has decided that it's more important to keep people socially distanced, it's the term of 2020, than that freedom to assemble. But I will say I've seen people do it. Like, I've seen people at the Capitol building, like a big group. They weren't arrested. Like, people aren't trying to be, overly punitive and give out huge punishments, but they're like, y'all should really probably go home. And that's how it's been happening. But the freedom of assembly does not overrule the special situation, but it has to be equal across the board. Okay. What's good about having all of these is that it does give us enough information to make good decisions. We need to be able to make good decisions about our leaders when we vote for governor, when we vote for mayor, when we vote for president. If the media is controlled by the president, how do we know the real information about the president, right? So the fact that we do have freedom of press allows us to have the real information. Now, I know that if you look at CNN, you're going to hear something different than if you look at Fox News, right? It's just the way it is. Truth is hard to nail down sometimes. It's like trying to nail a piece of Jell-O to the wall. But if you do your research, you should be able to find enough information to make a good, valid decision. The main point is the media outlets are not afraid to speak the truth about a politician. They're not afraid they're going to be arrested. They're not afraid they're going to be called into court. They're not afraid they're going to be killed. That's the serious nature of it in some countries. Here, they can say it. As long as it's true, they can say it. So that's super important for us to be able to make good choices, support our leaders, or choose new leaders, whatever the case may be, and also to sort of know what laws are out there, like they can speak about laws and if things have been taken out of context or something like that. We can hear that sort of thing on the news and know it and not have them be censored. Okay, so let's talk about things that do not necessarily qualify. Okay, so you can, when we say you can say whatever you want, say whatever you want, freedom of speech. You cannot say something that is going to cause an immediate, imminent threat, violence, a riot. You can't say something that's going to create a dangerous situation. Like one that they love to use in this example is you can't go into a concert with 20,000 people and yell fire, because what's going to happen? Everyone is going to rush to the exits and they're going to be trampled and people are going to be injured. Like, unless there is a fire, that is not something you can do and then plead what? Freedom of speech. I can say whatever I want. No, it cannot cause an imminent threat to the people around. If there are, sometimes we talked about those protests and there will be a group protesting something. And if another group walks up that has the opposite opinion and they start yelling back and forth, this could now become a not peaceful protest. So whoever is causing the violence is in the wrong. That does not fall under freedom of speech. We have to always think about protecting the safety of the public. All right. You cannot tell military secrets. Like if you become, I know some of you are probably going to grow up to become like FBI agents and things like that. I can see it. Once you know something that is a critically secret piece of information about our country, you can't go tell everybody and then go, what? Freedom of speech. I can say whatever I want. That is seriously not going to work. You have to take an oath. I'm not going to tell these military secrets, and then you don't tell the military secrets because it puts the whole country in danger when you do that. Time, place, and manner is another section that you'll read. So, like I was saying, you can't do a protest in front of a doorway. So the place could be challenged by the authorities, but they can't say you can't do it, right? Let's say that I was going to protest a fur store, a store that sold real mink furs, because maybe I thought that was cruelty to animals. And so I show up with my, 50 closest friends, and we go right into front of the store and we sit down where no one can get in the store. That does not fall under freedom of assembly, right? I'm not allowed to do that. So the police could come and say, ma'am, you're going to need to move your protest out of the doorway. They can't tell me I can't protest. They can't say, ma'am, you need to go home because you're not allowed to do this. No, they can give me a little better instruction. I will move to the middle of the street or sidewalk, maybe the street, sidewalk, and I can protest there, right? So they can tell me to move, or they can tell me I can't do this at a certain time or a certain place, but they can't tell me I can't do the protest. I have the right to assemble, but there could be rules that I need to follow in order to do that. Okay, also something interesting that was in the book that was attached to RenWeb. It talked about 3 people that were examples of why perhaps the founders thought it was really important to include freedom of expression in the Constitution. So the first one was Mary Dyer. So she lived in Massachusetts in 1660. She was killed because she was preaching. She was a Puritan, and she was telling the Puritans, or the Puritans said that she was telling people that slavery was wrong, and war was wrong, and the death penalty was wrong, and they killed her. They killed her because of the opinion that this and this and this were wrong. So we don't want that kind of situation here, right? So then there was another one, John Buckner, 1682, about 20 years later. This didn't even seem that bad to me. Like he had a printing press, and so he was printing the laws that they came up with, like, hey, make sure everybody knows what we're supposed to be doing, print out the laws. They didn't like that very much. The governor of Virginia said that Buckner did not have permission to print those laws, even though they had been passed. And so his solution was, now Buckner wasn't killed, thank goodness, but he said because of him and because he printed our laws, no more printing presses are allowed in Virginia. Like, that's censorship. Like, you're not allowed to print anything and pass it out because you printed the laws. I don't get it. He said, printing, this is the governor, printing has encouraged the people to learn. Can you imagine? And even criticize the best government. God keep us from free schools and printing. Lord help us. I mean, he was upset. No more printing presses. All right, and then the last guy was John Peter Zenger, and he was a newspaper reporter in New York. And in 1735, he wrote an article. It said the government was dishonest. And so he went to jail because you're not allowed to say that, even if it's true. So after a long trial, they actually took him to court to prosecute him for saying those things. And the jury decided that what he said was true, that the government was dishonest. So when the founders were laying down the foundation for this country, they were like, we have seen people persecuted for speaking the truth and for protesting something they didn't believe in and for saying something bad about the government, right? And we don't want this to be a place like that. We want it to be a place where people get all the information so that when they speak, when they vote, when they're talking to their neighbors, when they're on Facebook, I mean, they didn't say that, but I'm saying it. They're able to say things intelligently because they've been able to hear the actual truth. And so freedom of expression is probably the most important right that we have as Americans. And it's something we should not take for granted because, as I said, everyone in the world does not have it. Okay, make sure that you take a peek at this. It's page 142 in that handout that I've put in RenWeb. And when we do our Zoom, this is what we're going to be talking about. It is a court case, Finer versus New York, that you'll want to read about before we talk. So make sure you do that. And if you have any questions, of course, let me know. Talk to y'all later.